So today I'm joined by Wes Spencer, co-founder of Empath, a training and education platform for MSPs that's doing something a little different. As I reported on the show, instead of raising money from traditional VCs, they just closed a $2 million round entirely funded by industry insiders, many of them MSPs themselves. It is a bold move that creates alignment, advocacy, and maybe even some ownership, but it also raises some tough questions. Is it a scalable funding model or just clever community marketing? What happens when your investors are also your customers and they expect a voice? We'll dig into all of that, the structure of the raise, governance expectations, long-term vision, and what it means when an MSP platform is literally built by the people who use it. Let's get into it on this bonus episode of The Business of Tech. Well, Wes, welcome to the show.
Dave, thanks.
Now, I appreciate you joining on because the delightful context of this is, so you did a raise recently, and I covered it on the show, and asked a bunch of questions in the analysis. And your team reached out and said, hey, Dave, we'd like to answer your questions. So that's exactly the kind of conversation I like having on the show. Would love having you on to do it. So let's kind of dive in. You've done a really interesting thing in the way that the raise was put together. And you've positioned it as a community-driven raise. The obvious first question for me is, okay, tell me a little bit about the investment structure and what that looks like.
Yeah, so it's pretty simple structure from what others have done. Just it's the methodology and the resourcing that we use to do it. So all safe notes, which is really nice because there's no change in control of the company. Those are all convertible notes in the future, and pretty much every new startup does safe. It's fair to the investor and it's fair to the investee, right? And so we just have literal standard Y Combinator safe notes that we used, and really made life easy. It reduces the amount of diligence that has to be done. It reduces the amount of risk to both parties. And the only real difference, Dave, is who we chose to raise those safes from. Like VCs would call this more like an insider round. And the only difference for us, and we can talk about this more in a minute, only difference for us was the amount was a lot different than what might be standard.
Okay, so particularly for those MSPs who may not be familiar with investment rounds, like so that by putting it in the safe structure, like that means that they have to be qualified investors at some level, right? There's some. So walk me through a little bit of the restrictions, particularly so we can educate the MSPs on what that means.
And vendors, I might add, because this is really important. So there's a lot that goes into this. This is not free money waving around. And there's always this risk that someone tries to do this and it becomes a giant Ponzi, right? And who's left holding the bag is the investees, right? And so this is why the federal government protects this. The SEC, they have a whole thing called qualified investor. And the reason for that is because when you get into these types of things, it's sort of this idea of, and I'm not giving legal advice, I'm not giving investor advice, anything like that, right? But this is just my understanding is that, they want to protect those that are not professional investors, right? That actually in many ways could lose more than they could afford, right? And so one of the things that comes with this is you have to be very careful. Reg D, it's SEC Reg D. There's a lot of things that go with this of how you can't solicit for these investors. You have to have a lot of language, and there has to be some proof around being a qualified investor. And I'm not going to go through that. You can just Google SEC qualified investor, get the list. But yeah, so we had to do all of that, made sure we have a paper trail, worked with our legal team to make sure this was done correctly. And also another reason why we lean on Y Combinator safe notes, which to just high level what that is, that comes out of Google's accelerator called Y Combinator. And it's a very fair way to raise money that almost every startup uses. In fact, when I invest, I look for a Y Combinator safe. And the best thing I see is when they say I have a no red line, Y Combinator safe. I can pick it up. I know exactly what we're looking at. Standard language for investing. And really makes life easy. And so that's what we did. So we used Y Combinator to really prove we're doing this in the right way with nothing weird in the safe note. But then also made sure that these are qualified investors. We limited the amount that they could give. I had multiple that wanted to give far more than what we allowed. Because we want to be in this boat where not only do I want a number of great investors come in that we deeply respect and we can lean on and put some skin in the game, but also didn't want them to lose too much.
So give me a little bit, obviously I'm not asking specific investor names, but give me a little bit of a sense of the demographics, because if we talk about people with investor level knowledge of this space, I would kind of think that that's not necessarily a massive list. And one of the things that you've really positioned this is like having MSPs have some skin in the game. Tell me a little bit about the profile of who these insiders are.
Yeah, so I probably can give you a list of some of those, like after we jump on air, if you want to if you ever want to do some individual interviews. But high level demographics, most of them are CEOs of MSPs, somewhere in 25 million in revenue and up. The vast majority of them. We have a few vendor investors that I am able to explain, Adam Slutskin, David Bellini, a number of folks that really know their salt, know what they're doing. So we had some strategics come in as well. And for us, one of the things that we really wanted, I've seen maybe this turn of the age a bit in the MSP space, where you have a lot of MSPs that have been operating for 10 to 20 years, that have built great businesses, that have seen vendors come, rise, and fall, and get a little frustrated with, why is this constantly happening? And I don't have a say in it, I don't have a voice in it, and I'd love to even get a return in it if we believe in the mission of what this company is doing. And so I think we're in that age where this is really becoming a thing that can be done. And I'm not advocating that anyone do what we do, for sure. But what I am saying is it was, the conversations are far easier than what we thought they might be. Not because they have money they want to throw away, but because the answer I heard from so many of them was that right there of, we built a great business and we want to impact the vendor ecosystem around us. One of the best ways we can do that is come in as an investor.
Well, that makes perfect sense, which leads to my next question is, tell me a little bit about the governance expectations here, because if, in theory, this is also, some of them could be customers, right? And so if customers are looking for an impact into Empath's direction, how are you going to manage that?
Yeah. So some are not. I'd like for all of them to be, and we're always working towards that for sure. So a couple things on that. So from a governance perspective, there's no change in control. There's no board seats that came with this. So literally nothing changes from the day to day with Empath. But I owe them, both as a good steward of their investment and just the way we treat investors, I owe them data. I owe them information. And so what we do, and we're very clear with them, is that they're joined into a quarterly investment newsletter, and we kind of share everything that's working. So we have a very standardized template. We actually sent out just the last one a month or so ago. And it walked through, here's where revenue's at, here's where we're performing, and a whole bunch of KPIs that you want to see, like burn rates and burn multiples and customer acquisition costs and all these things that we push in. And then we also say, here's what's not working, and here's where our struggles were, and here's some areas you might be able to help us. So we're very clear. I don't really hold anything back to the investors on where we're at. And of course, if they want to call me up and have a deeper conversation, we're wide open to that. And so we find that to be great because it does give them insight into what's going on, gives them a chance to jump in if they have thoughts and questions. We'll even walk through, here's some of the major features we're working on. Does this make sense? We actually don't have a customer advisory board. And at this point, we have no interest in turning one up. And so we don't treat them like a customer advisory board. We don't have a separate advisory board. What we actually do is we invite every partner. We do a lot of the community-led growth that Roost and a number of others are doing. We invite every partner in together once a month. We talk about what we're building. We solicit feedback because we need it from, the mass of all of our customers. And so that's the way we do it. Haven't had any flack or feedback from our investors on that. And they typically don't get heavily involved in the product strategy perspective. They're much more interested in how can we help our investment grow. So whether that's introductions to other MSPs, whether that's, just jumping in and saying, hey, y'all are doing great. Here's some thoughts for you, talking to them at conferences, catching up. Those are the kind of things that we've noticed have been immense benefits for us.
And again, for the benefit of MSPs that may not be familiar with this type structure, would it be a fair qualification to say that they are an important set of voices, but don't have any different level of voices than, say, a customer or an external, based on the governance structure? Is that a fair qualification?
That's very fair, right? And you compare that to a VC that comes in, and maybe I should say this too, we're very pro VC, and maybe we can talk more about that too. But when a VC comes in, they typically get a board seat. They typically are diving deep into pretty much everything. They're going to be talking to you once a month and have some amount of voting control, some amount of power and influence over the company. So I'm not against VCs or anything about them. VCs are critical to the process and how so many companies grow. And there'll be a day that we'll work with VCs, and happy to talk more about that. But typically a VC is going to be investing anywhere from $500,000 to tens of millions of dollars into that investment, right? And so if they do something like that, they want control to some degree. They want a board seat. They want influence over the company. We talking to you once a month. And I don't blame them because they've got to protect that significant investment they made, right? And so we just believe where we're at as a company, we are so young and new. We're 14 months since launch. And so we have to be very careful about, not letting outside influence in that could really steer the ship in a way we don't want to go. I've made that mistake before in prior lives and don't want to have that happen quite yet in our company.
We'll be right back after this message. This episode is supported by Syncro. Syncro, the integrated remote monitoring and management and professional services automation platform, is designed for mid-sized and growing managed service providers. Its latest innovations include an AI-powered smart ticket management system with automatic ticket classifications, guided resolution steps using pre-approved scripts, and a natural language smart search function. These tools streamline ticket handling and improve response times. Discover more at syncromsp.com. And we're back. So you brought up VC, which was one of the areas that I wanted to go into, because my analysis on this was that tapping into this MSP base is very clever, but it's also very finite. And at some point, scaling will likely mean turning to private equity money or venture capital money. They're different, but I wanted to ask broadly, like, how do you see the balance between this community-based capital and institutional capital as the organizational grows?
Yep. So I can speak to this because I operate in the same way. I've invested in, 6, 7, 8 very young companies that are all in the channel myself as a non-professional angel. And I've also worked with VCs, both of my days at Perch and just oftentimes just in, market analysis, talking to VCs, all of this, right? And so everyone has a place in this ecosystem. Hot take from me, if I may. I don't believe anymore that there's any venture left in venture capital for any company sub $2 million in revenue. There just generally isn't. I'm not speaking in absolutes, but largely speaking, my experience in talking to VCs is that they want to de-risk their investments, and I don't blame them. So they're in the stage where they want to see probably deeper product market fit, and they want to see some amount of stability before they put an investment in. And so typically they're looking for somewhere in 1 to 2 million and usually skewing towards the high end of 2 million before they make an investment. If they see something they really like that's under that, they know it's significantly high risk. So they're going to ask for 1 board seat. Dave, I've seen some even ask for 2 board seats, which to me is pretty egregious. And they want to de-risk a significant amount of this by equity valuations and all that. And that's tough for a young company, right? The only way you escape that is you either have a deep pocket yourself to where you bootstrap your company for quite some time, which is what we did. We bootstrapped, I don't mind to say it publicly, we bootstrapped about $700K on our own to get maybe a little over that to get Empath off the ground. So that's option 1. Or option 2 is you might end up taking a round from a VC that could, if you're not careful, bury you into the future, right? You already have equity problems from the very get-go. So I'm not saying to anybody listening, don't work with VCs if you're sub 2 million. I'm just saying, understand it's difficult. And I kind of wonder if it's difficult because the model of venture capital typically works at that range and higher. So now we back up and we say, well, if that thesis is true, then how does a young company get to market earlier on? Well, maybe it is working on, if you can't bootstrap yourself, finding those that love what you're doing, understand the business model, respect you as a founder, and say, hey, I think this is something that I like and I want to get in early because I know the market better than VCs because I'm in the market. And that type of insight around is quite common in the world around us. And I'm not saying that I want to see it happen more or less. I'm not encouraging vendors to do what we did. I'm just saying that it's our experience, and you got to find a way to accelerate the early days of your company and protect it. Otherwise, you can really turn things sideways, and it's hard to course correct the ship if you're not careful.
Yeah, and by the way, for listeners, the data is backing up exactly what Wes is saying in terms of the VC funding retreating from that. One of the positive thoughts is, of course, money now costs more. With interest rates going up,
right.
VCs can afford to take less risk. I've covered it on the show, and in particular, you mentioned the vendor side. I want to make sure that MSPs understand, particularly because most of them do not have nearly the depth of experience of this unless they've achieved multiple levels or gone through those M&A rounds. A lot of this is new terminology for a lot of them. So let's give them a little bit of thinking into the, how business decisions like pricing or product roadmap evolve. Like, how are you going to manage the potential conflict there when, your investors, particularly, or investor customers, have a particular set of thoughts, but you and the leadership team have got a different direction? Have you thought through how you're going to handle that tension?
Yeah, you're talking about that's my day job. That's what I do every day. And whether it's someone that's come in as an investor or just one of our most important most like strategic or largest customers, like that happens often. I've been through that since my days at Perch and into today, and other companies I've worked with and advised. I'm very used to that world. So I think a couple of things. I think understanding that in almost every case, they're asking for this because they really believe in it, right? In many cases, they're not wrong. One of the tricks I picked up from Aaron at Perch when we built Perch together, he often said, sometimes I give them what they want so I can give them so that I can build for them what I know they need. In other words, I'm hearing what you're saying. I get what you're asking for, but I actually think that's just a component of something larger. And so I'm going to keep that into the design consideration. Or I might say, hey, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to actually build a ticket for that, put that into the roadmap and show you where it's at, documented in the roadmap, but it's 5 months out. And here's why. What I've learned is most of the time when people know that they've been heard and they understand, and I understand what they're asking for and why, usually they say, cool, I can take my hands back off that and I'm okay with it. So typically that's a manageable thing. It really just becomes, how do you become a great listener to your investors, to those that are strategic to you as a company? And people say, I want to do community-led growth all the time, but they're not willing to actually invest in listening to your base. That's poison, right? And so if you're going to go that direction, you better be really good at it and have the understanding and ability to know how to navigate those waters.
Now, I want to get a little bit of a perspective here, because a lot of startups often look for the so-called smart money, like investors who bring network or scale or experience. In a way, this is not necessarily that. So do you think there's risks by focusing inward and raising from in a way, your own user base and community? And is there some advantage that you're offsetting here? Like, how do you frame that thinking when the typical play would be go for the smart money?
Yeah, great question. So VCs love to say we bring the smart money because they know so here's the thing that we know as CEOs, as founders, if my company is performing well and revenue is steadily growing and all things are under control, then money is the least of difficulty to go. I can find money for sure. So then it becomes, who do I find from a VC that passes the beer test, right? And that passes here's all the other things I provide. So VCs do that. Every time I talk to them, they come in and they say, this is why we're amazing, because of all this other stuff we can offer for you beyond the money. I would say the same thing too. So when it comes to our investors that come from the MSP space, yeah, for sure. So we have to prove that we had a prior existing relationship with them. And so that gives me the luxury of saying, who are some of those people that we want to go and talk to? And I'm sure I've forgotten some people that maybe I should have talked to for sure. But we went and asked people that we deeply respect. And I'll give you maybe 2 examples that I know that I have permission to share. One is Jennifer Vanderveer. Jennifer was the president at F1, phenomenal MSP. She successfully exited it. And I talk to her weekly. She's become a good friend of mine. We're constantly talking about thoughts and ideas and things we're working on. And it's absolutely amazing to work with her. Another is Sean Torres. So Sean is the CEO of Intellicom. They're about getting close to somewhere in that $40 to $50 million range. MSP, all organic, no M&A. Unbelievable. And so you better believe we lean on him. What is a fast growth MSP looking for? And when you guys are hiring 20 to 30 people on the regular every quarter, how can we help make sure that we're meeting the demands of this MSP? So we leverage those things on the reg. Now we have some investors for sure that just say, I like what you're doing. I'm busy with a million things and I'll read your newsletter and that's it. See you later. And that's fine too. So that's kind of how we view it. But I understand the value that VCs bring, and that's critically important. But I also think don't undersell the value that the relationships you've built for years in the industry can also bring. And it's more of a unique perspective because it's less of just how do we use pure math to grow a company, which is what VCs do, to a lot more of the touch and feel of what's happening inside the industry. And Dave, I might argue that that's probably a little bit more valuable in the early days than anything else.
Well, as I wrap up our time together, like give me a little bit of a sense of like how much runway this is put together for. Like, I know you're not going to give me dates and specifics, but give me a little bit of a sense of the timetable, because you have openly talked about thinking about additional rounds. Give me a little bit of sense of the timetable.
I'll give you specifics. We're a wide open book. So we should be hitting $1 million in revenue this month, which is a huge milestone. 12 months to $1 million is we're over the moon with that. We're about 300 and getting close to 350 partners in the door. Really excited about that. This money gives us a runway, and I'll even be very specific. We have two models that we operate off of. We're very mature on this. So one model will have runway until about August or September of next year. So call it a 16-month runway, something right around there. I also have a model that goes to cash flow positive. And the reason that we've done that is because you just don't know what's going to happen in the world around us. And so being able to pull a ripcord of pulling back on conference spend, pulling back on a number of those kinds of things, it really lets us just continue on slow, methodical growth. I have a model that works for that too. So there you have it. I'm very transparent on exactly where we're going. And the thing I will just belabor is we treat this very seriously with our partners. We are very transparent and we are great stewards of what we're doing, right? I fear the day that somebody does what we've done and they go blow it on moon Lambos and private jets and parties and just turns into an upside down Ponzi. If you're going to go this route, this is not my advice. I'm not giving advice, but I'm just telling you, you owe it to those investors to be very clear, to fly the cheapest flight you can find, to be very careful on where your spend goes, and to be open and transparent on where you're going as a company, because otherwise this thing can turn around very quickly.
Wes Spencer is the co-founder of Empath, a training and education platform purpose-built for managed service providers. A repeat entrepreneur and nationally recognized cybersecurity leader, Wes has helped shape several high-growth ventures in the MSP and security space, including Perch Security and ConnectWise. At Empath, he is pioneering a community-driven approach to platform development, backed not by VCs, but by the community who use it. Wes, I really appreciate you joining me and being so transparent with the questions and your plans.
Dave, thank you so much for having me.
The Business of Tech is written and produced by me, Dave Sobel, under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you've subscribed or followed on your favorite platform. It's free and helps directly. Give us a review too. If you want to support the show, visit patreon.com/MSP Radio and you'll get access to content early. Or buy our Why Do We Care merch at businessof.tech. Have a question you want answered? We take listener questions, send them in, ideally as a voice memo or video to question@mspradio.com. I answer listener questions live on our Wednesday live show on YouTube and LinkedIn. If you've got a comment or a thought on a story, put it in the comments if you're on YouTube, or reach out on LinkedIn if you're listening to the podcast. And if you want to advertise on the show, visit mspradio.com/engage. Once again, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you again on our next episode.
Part of the MSP Radio Network.